And just like none of your ribbons are going to tear in the same way, it's not reasonable to expect that any of you are going to feel the same way at any given time, and that however you feel is completely okay. So I'll invite you to repeat after me in the Hebrew, and then following you'll tear your ribbons. Okay? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Dayan ha'emet Adonai natan V'Adonai lakach Yehi shem Adonai mevarach. You take from the bottom, and we'll just, if you need help, I can help you. We recognize God as the source of all beginnings and God as a part of all endings. But what we're here doing is actually celebrating what came between. Jack's life, his legacy, his beautiful family, and the impact he had on all of you and on everybody else. And that's what we're here for today. Hello everyone. I'm the rabbi from Lionsgate. I'm Rabbi Rayna Grossman, and it's an honor to be here with you as we celebrate Jack Kogan's life, his legacy, and his memory. I know that Jack's loss has already been felt by Lionsgate. All day, staff have been coming to my office, sending condolences to you, his family. Many of them wish they could be here with you, but unfortunately they are unable to do so. But I want you to know that Lionsgate loves Jack and misses Jack and is already feeling the loss of him in our community. I would also specifically like to raise up his family whom he loved dearly. He would tell anyone and everyone about how wonderful all of you were, all the time. Every time I talked with him, he wanted to share about all of you. Specifically, we're thinking about his sister Selma, who I understand is not here with us today, but is certainly thinking of Jack, and his children Nomi, and her husband Jack, Debbie, Philip, and Nancy, and Mitchell and Eileen, and his wonderful grandchildren and great-grandchildren whom he bragged about to anybody who would listen. I'd also specifically like to mention Diana and Marquita and Fran, who all had special connections to Jack, and who all made special connections with him in Lionsgate specifically. What a tremendous loss Jack's passing has been to so many people. We'll begin with Psalm 23. It's a psalm that reminds us that even when we feel alone, or even when we are physically distanced, as many of us have been now for so long, we are never actually alone. That God is always with us. Feel free to join in the Hebrew, and afterwards we'll recite in the English. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai ravi lo echsar, binat asher yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yenahaleini. Nafshi yeshover, nafshi yeshover, yancheni v'magle tzedek leman shemo, gam ki elech begetz hamavet, lo yirara ki ata imadi, shivtecha umishantecha, shivtecha umishantecha, hema yenachamuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan, taroch lefanai shulchan, taroch lefanai shulchan, neged zorerai, dishanta vashemen roshi, dishanta vashemen roshi, dishanta vashemen roshi, kol sirevaya. Yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, veshavti Veshavti beveit Adonai, Veshavti beveit Adonai leorech yamim. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I would like to invite some of Jack's family to speak first on their love and memories of him. Heather, would you like to start first? I'm not your turn.
All right. Before I get started, I just want to settle something with my cousins and sisters. I don't want to argue, but just so we're all clear, I was his favorite. You can fight for the second spot, but I take number one. My grandparents had this great way of making everyone feel they were their favorite, but in reality, they were equally good to all of us, except that Abby and Zev had their own roofs, even though they went to sleepaway camp. I never got that, but it's time to let it go. I remember how Zadie put everyone's college sticker in his rear window. It looked silly, but he was so proud. I'm not gonna cry. My grandparents saw the best in all of us and were incredibly proud. They relished being grandparents. All feelings and behaviors I see echoed in my parents with their grandchildren. These are unique and beautiful relationships. For some reason, after my grandfather retired, he started helping my father at his auto repair business. Someone decided that his time would be better spent chaperoning my class trips, and it turned out to be a great idea. My bubby would send him with the largest brown bags you've ever seen full of lunch, and he would go with me to the zoo or the museum or wherever we were going, and pig out on Bubby's lunch and have a blast. He liked the bus, he liked getting to know my teachers, the whole thing, and he always found me entertaining. One time it was so hot on the bus and I recognized we were on the same road that my sisters and I took to day camp. There was a gas station that had a large sign that said 24 pack of Coke, $5.99. I stood up and announced to the teacher that I needed $6 because we were all thirsty and I wanted to stop and buy everyone a drink. He could have gotten angry at me, but he thought I was a hoot. I remember him laughing like crazy. He couldn't believe the stuff I would say. I heard him retell that story multiple times over the years. When I went to college in York, Pennsylvania, it was not a nice place to visit. Outside of Harley-Davidson, the only things to see there were gangs and cornfields. But my grandparents loved coming and never missed a family weekend. They treated it like it was a weekend in Paris. I have a memory of getting to the annual Hillel breakfast early to set up and walking through an empty parking lot and just seeing just their car in the handicap spot. They were always early, just happy to be there, didn't want to miss a minute. When I wanted to intern at a TV station my senior year, my grandfather volunteered to speak to the lady he knew that ran the NBC affiliate in Atlantic City. He raved about this woman, and he wanted me to know her as much as he wanted her to know me. She ended up letting me intern and told me that when Jack went to see her about my internship, he told her he knew that everybody wanted her to hire their grandkids, that they were all the best and the smartest and the brightest, but forget them because Heather will blow them all away. He loved being a fan. After college, I wasn't sure what direction to go in. My Zadie told me I needed to do something with people and use my personality, that it was an asset. He was the first person that mentioned a career in sales to me. After 4 years in college, I had never even thought of it. He gave me direction and always had confidence. Zadie never wanted to tell you that you were wrong, just made sure to point out when you had done something really right. He never said he hated my curly hair, just how much better it looked when it was straight. We definitely bonded over certain things. The best is making fun of how nuts my father can be. I think we felt we understood him differently than the rest of the world, like we three were all versions of each other. Zadie always looked snazzy and understood my appreciation for a really great jacket. He loved New York and always wanted to report on the city, and we both loved real estate. I would jokingly hit him up for money all the time by mentioning property I wanted to buy and tell him what an opportunity it was. He knew I was only half joking and got a kick out of my willingness to proposition him. He really was a wonderful grandfather, and he would have loved that in true Heather fashion, I found a way to make much of this speech about me. I'm grateful that I had him and will miss him very much.
Thank you, Heather. Also, Sivan.
Well, the first memory I have of my Alta Zadie is when I went to my brother's bris and he was holding him and he seemed so happy to meet his fourth great-grandchild. Now, I do have a lot of memories of Alta Zadie from over the years, but my absolute favorite is when me and my brother and my two cousins, Eli and Remy, went to Lionsgate and we played Cars Monopoly, and we also played Mary Had a Little Lamb on the piano, and we all had so much fun. I remember Alta Zadie just laughed the entire time, and he gave us all a tour of Lionsgate. I do miss him dearly, but I know he had a great long life. I am glad I got to know him. Thank you.
Thank you, Sivan. So that Marnie and Abby would also like to speak.
So Winnie the Pooh said it best, how lucky I am to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard. I think back to my childhood and there wasn't a moment that you and Bubby missed. In fact, you were always there hours before. Then I would roll my eyes and I'd probably, like my kids do now, ask, why are you here now? But what I would do to rewind to those moments when you came early and to sit and talk to you again. Bubby would ask what's doing, and you would always be so proud of whatever came out of our mouths. In fact, you were so proud of all your grandchildren, each for something different. Just last month, David and I and the kids came to visit. I told you I had taken up tennis just like you, and I was loving it. David jokingly, but yes, seriously, told you I wasn't that good. You started to cry, telling David not to say that. David quickly changed his tune and told you I was the best, Serena Williams good. In your eyes, I could never do any wrong. I was always the best at everything. We should all have a Zadie like you, supportive, loving, encouraging. The list goes on. Zadie was the best husband there was. Getting around was not easy for Bubby, and he could have stayed home, never traveled, never gone out, but not our Zadie. He built a ramp to his house, and they went places and they did things. They even drove all over the country visiting their grandkids. My freshman year of college, I went to Indiana. They drove from New Jersey with a dog that was the size of my dorm room. They saw it somewhere and reminded them of my dog from home, and they knew I needed to have it. They took me to dinner, visited my dorm room, and my Zadie even attended a class with me. At the time, I was probably a little embarrassed, but what I would do to go back and bring him with me somewhere, I would be beaming with pride. How lucky am I to have had him as my Zadie. My favorite childhood memories are all from the shore. My grandparents had a house that we wanted to go to and we never wanted to leave. My cousins and I would spend weekends at the house dancing, making shows, going to the beach, eating ice cream multiple times a day, and the list goes on. My Mubby and Zadie would give us milk and cookies and sit with us and always asking what's doing. My Zadie also never missed an opportunity to eat cookies and ice cream with us. Zadie and Bubby, your legacy lives on because my mom and dad are doing the same thing. They are there for Zev and I and our kids every step of the way, even though they wish they could physically do more with Zev's. They come early to see my kids. They don't miss a beat, always creating experiences and memories that last longer than any toy on the shelf. How lucky I was, how lucky I am, and how lucky my kids are. You have instilled in your children to be there for each other. Watching my mom and her siblings come together to make sure you are getting the best care, happiness, and well-fed has truly been inspiring. I can't wait for the day that we can comfortably get together for the holidays because we are going to continue on this path that you have created. We will miss you, but know we will keep your love, life, and memories going as we create beautiful memories in your memory because you have taught us that family is everything. We love you and we will always love you.
So this is a lot of repetition because he was who he was, and also this is longer than it should be, and I apologize in advance. Also, I noticed I have a pimple this morning, and that would have really upset him. He would have said, "What's that? What's that on your face?" My date, I wrote to a friend in November of 2009, was exceedingly handsome. He was surpassingly charming. He was polite and interesting and interested. He was also my grandfather. At that time, Bubby had just been moved to skilled nursing, and she and Zadie were both adjusting to the new realities of their lives. That day, Aunt Nomi and Uncle Jack had arrived at Lionsgate before Mom and me and had suggested that Zadie take a break from sitting with Bubby. As usual, he'd been with her all day, and go have dinner over an independent living. I decided to go surprise him. I found Zadie sitting down with 3 others I noted in my email, but when he saw me, he got up, all smiles, and found us a table for 2. Other residents dropped by our table to greet Zadie and to ask about Bubby, and he kibitzed with all of them in that easy, disarming way he had. A woman named Selena came over, I wrote. She was wearing a red sweatsuit with appliqued strawberries and hearts. She's a retired school teacher, and every week Zadie saves her the New York Times book review. She drives him crazy, he confided to me, and so it's all the more extraordinary how demonstrably generous he is with her. But that was just Zadie, wasn't it? He was kind, he was charming, he was funny, and he liked to be liked. He never wanted to make a scene, and he strived in most interactions to put the other party at ease. In Zadie's high school yearbook from 1944, the Camden High School Purple and Gold, he was described in his friends' inscriptions as a swell guy, a swell pal, and a good egg. That last one in particular captured it, I think. A good egg. Zadie was a good egg. The other day, trying to describe him to someone, I found myself struggling. It reminded me of the trouble I'd had years ago trying to draw him. I was working from a portrait taken of Zadie in high school, and in it he faces the camera head on. I remember finding it difficult to fill in the shape of his mouth, to get that bit right. Similarly, trying to capture him in words has been somewhat elusive, and in the end, the best I could come up with was this. He was just a really great guy. It sounded lame even to my ears, not unlike a swell pal, but Zadie was so much, so many things, and in the end, what is great? In its dictionary definition, it's this: unusually or comparatively large in size or dimensions, unusual or considerable in degree, power, wonderful, very good, first rate, exceptionally outstanding, notable, remarkable, highly significant, or consequential. Zadie was all of that. He was all of that and more. Zadie was also a man who wore fur. Not all men can pull off a fur coat, and frankly, few should try. Zadie could, though. In one of my favorite photos of him and Bubby, it's 1982, and Zadie is holding baby Hannah. Both he and Bubby are swaddled in furs. His is shearling, hers some sort of white animal, possibly a rabbit. Bubby is beaming, looking glamorous. Zadie's smile is more subtle, but his gorgeous dimple is in full view. They're doing what they loved most, taking care of their family, also wearing furs. It always struck me as funny that, for a man who had some alarmingly retrograde ideas about gender, Zadie was in fact not exactly the most traditionally masculine of men. In addition to the furs, he liked hats, clothes in general, fancy watches, shopping for women's clothing and jewelry, interior design. Once in later years, Aunt Nomi took him to Anthropology to look for a birthday present for Mom, and he enjoyed it so much that he'd often suggest we go there so he could buy me something nice. I have a pair of printed pants from there that he particularly liked, and he never failed to comment on them. In another favorite photo of mine, it's 1986, and I'm a baby, and I'm wearing a little hooded getup, and Zadie is holding me, his cheek resting atop my head. He's dressed well this day, too, in a striped button-down shirt with some sort of sheen. He looks, I've often told Mom, like he's cherishing me. Like there's nothing else he'd rather do, nowhere else in the world he'd rather be. And I suspect that this was true because above all else, Zadie was devoted to the people he loved, to his family, to us in other words. From another email, "You look pretty in that shirt," Bubby said. She all but batted her eyes at him. Zadie was wearing a lavender and white striped button-down with a green polo insignia. "Not every man can wear that color," she added. Zadie smiled and broke into a wheezy laugh. "Please, Beverly," he said, "not in public. They'll think something's going on between us." No one's marriage is perfect, but from the outside anyway, Bubby and Zadie seemed pretty damn close. It lasted more than 60 years, and at times it seemed to me that they spent all of their time alone together. On the porch in Margate, traveling across country by Mercedes, Zadie forever behind the wheel, going to Europe and Israel and crisscrossing New Jersey to visit the various children and grandchildren, and then later sitting side by side at the nursing home where Zadie spent nearly every waking moment for the 2 years Bubby lived there. She was always saving him a seat, and he was always on his way to her. One year, towards the end of Bubby's life, Aunt Nomi invited Zadie to spend Rosh Hashanah at her house. He declined, though, saying that he'd spent every Rosh Hashanah with Bubby for 59 years, and he wasn't about to stop now. The problem is that there isn't enough time to tell all the things that Zadie was, and also there aren't enough words. I could write a dissertation on Bubby and Zadie's love story alone, or on his other passionate love affair with food. I could write and talk and never manage to say it all. At the end of the day, there's this. Zadie loved us. He loved his children desperately. His love for his grandchildren was equally fervent, but easier, as is often the case with grandchildren. Zadie loved us unconditionally and took immense joy in our every triumph. He went to plays and sports games, to graduation and school grandparents' days. He went on college tours with me, and he even attended a law school class with Hannah. His pride in me knew no bounds, though it seemed to me all out of proportion with my actual abilities and accomplishments. He loved to hear me read Torah or Haftorah, and he thought my voice was good as any cantor's. He kept a binder of everything I wrote, good or bad, published and unpublished. He decorated the binder himself, cutting letters out of magazines to spell my name, the names of places I'd published or interned, serial killer style, and taping them to the front. Every word I wrote was, to his eye, brilliant. You could do anything, he said to me recently. He said it in an accusatory sort of way, wanting me to understand that I was squandering my potential and that he believed that I was more than this. When I was small, Zadie took me to get ice cream somewhere down the shore. It was across a little bridge, I remember. I was then, and maybe remain, deeply unadventurous and ordered one scoop of chocolate ice cream. Zadie and I sat at a table and I proceeded to eat my ice cream slowly. After several torturous minutes of watching me, Zadie reached across the table, grabbed the cone, and finished the ice cream himself. I remember being shocked. What sort of man would take an ice cream from a little girl? Zadie. Zadie was that sort of man. And God knows there ought to be more just like him. He was fucking great.
Definitely not too long. Are there any other family members that were hoping to speak now? There'll be many other opportunities during Shiva and throughout the days and weeks to come. This is not at all your only opportunity. I'd like to share a few words because I really loved Jack and he was such a joy to have in our community. I first met him at Shabbat services in independent living. Jack was consistently one of the first people there. Oftentimes with Fran, but sometimes he'd be there ahead of her. And he would always greet me with a smile and say, Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi, and ask me how the day had gone. He was always dressed impeccably. And then he would proceed to take all of the prayer books, and instead of leaving them in the crate for people to pick up as they came in, he would pass them out on every chair. And at the beginning I said, Jack, I appreciate your optimism, but I don't think we're gonna fill all these seats. But he said, I'm gonna pass them out just in case. And that became our process. He would pass them out and we would hope that his optimism could fill all of the seats in the front few rows. Even though people like to sit at the way back, he filled the front rows, hoping that they would come forward. He also always participated in services. He sang, he read, he was smiling and laughing. He enjoyed himself and he was a joy to have. A rabbi we can't ask for more than someone who's happy to be there and participates in our services. And when it came time for oneg, a word which in and of itself means delight, Jack took delight in oneg. Now Friday night is only Manischewitz and challah, but you would have thought it was a full spread. He savored every morsel, enjoyed it, and then went to dinner to savor even more oneg. Jack brought that same enthusiasm to every interaction, that same warmth that he brought in services, to every chance encounter, whether I saw him in the hallway on one of his earlier morning walks that he took through our community, whether I ran into him at a program, whether in independent living or assisted living. He greeted me with a smile, with his warmth. He was friendly and outgoing. And that wasn't special. That was everybody. As I said, staff have been coming to me all day, knowing I was going to be here with you and sharing their memories and their appreciation and love for Jack. There's a teaching in the Mishnah where a great rabbi asks his students to go out and find what is the best way that a person can live. How should we behave? What is optimal? His first student comes back and says, a person should have a good eye. For a person with a good eye looks favorably upon other people, treats them with respect and kindness. A person with a good eye takes pleasure from what they have, They're able to find happiness and joy with their lot in life. The second student replies, the best a person can do is to be a good friend. For someone who is a good friend is dependable, trustworthy, and helpful. They are someone who will lend a hand when a hand is needed. They'll offer advice when asked, and they'll share in the joys and sorrows of life. The third student said, Rabbi, I believe that the best thing a person can do is to cling to that attribute of being a good neighbor. For a good neighbor is courteous and considerate. They respect the property and needs of those around them, and furthermore, they give of themselves to help others. The fourth student says the best way a person can live is by considering the outcomes and consequences of their actions, being measured and thoughtful, understanding how their actions will impact other people, and thinking of others. Finally, the fifth student comes forward and says, I believe that the best thing a person can have, the best way one can live, is to have a good heart, a lev tov. Before the student could enumerate, the teacher interjects and says that all the offered ideas are wonderful, they're all well-reasoned, but the lev tov is the correct answer, because having a lev tov includes all of the other attributes. Someone with a lev tov has a good eye. They're a good friend and neighbor, and they understand well their impact on others and seek to bring joy and seek to do well. That text was written around the year 220 Common Era. It could have been written about Jack. Jack had a lev tov. He had a good heart. He was a wonderful friend and neighbor, both to those he had special close relationships like Fran and others, as well as to everybody in Lionsgate. Kayla, one of our dining managers at Lionsgate, had a very special relationship with Jack. She asked me to share one of her favorite memories, which exemplifies how much of a lev tov he had. When Nomi ordered a birthday cake for him recently in April, it was a big sheet cake, and Kayla was there to help cut and make sure that he got his birthday cake. The first thing he said to her was, I can't eat all of this cake by myself, which maybe perhaps wasn't entirely true, but it was the feeling that counted here. He immediately says, can I share it with people? Can we make sure everyone gets some of this cake? Kayla told me that that was the quintessential Jack that she knew and loved. Somebody willing to share, somebody looking to share with everybody around him. He was sweet and caring, and that was something that we all needed, that brightened all of our days, even in the difficult year we've had. Every time I saw Jack, he was always, hi, Rabbi, how are you doing? And I asked him how he was doing, and he would talk about his family and how much he wished that you all could be together, and how much he wished that he could come to services in person. Virtual services just don't have the same feeling, and there wasn't Oneg afterwards. Jack's memory is already a blessing at Lionsgate, and I know that it will continue to be a blessing for all of you. I can see the legacy that he is giving to his family, his grandchildren, his children, his great-grandchildren, and to all of those who had the pleasure and the honor of knowing him. We'll now honor his memory with the El Malei Rachamim prayer. If it's comfortable for you to stand, I invite you to do so.
El Malei Rachamim Shochen Bamromim Hametzeh Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechina B'ma'alot Kedashim U'Teharim Kezar Harakim HaMazirim Et Nishmat Yaakov Ben Eliber Shalach le'olamo Began Eden tehei menuchato Ana Ba'al harachamim Asdirehu v'setek nafecha le'olamim V'titzror b'tzror ha'chayim Et nishmato Adonai hu nachalato Ve'anuach b'shalom al mishkavo V'nomar Amen.
We'll continue with Mourner's Kaddish. If you'd like to start, I'll join with you once you begin.
Yiskadav,
Kadash, Shemei Rabbah, בעלמא דברה חירותי והליך מלכותי וחיי כל יומכם וחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבא מברך לעולם ועולמי עלמיא. יתברך וישבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתגבר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי קדושה וברכו לעילם כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תאמירן בעלמא ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמם רבא משמיא חיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. ועושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. Amen. Zichrono livracha. His memory is already a blessing and will continue to be so. So we're now going to take a moment and we're going to lower the casket. And following the lowering, we have an opportunity to do an incredibly beautiful and special mitzvah. It's called the Chesed Shel Emet. It's a true act of kindness because it is understood that this is our last way to show physical love to our loved one. We'll have an opportunity to shovel earth onto the casket, and that will be our way of saying goodbye, at least in the physical sense. Jack, go to his place in peace. I'll invite you guys in first. Anyone who would like to have the opportunity, please come forward. There is a custom to use the back to show reluctance, though not everyone adheres to that custom. For some people, another custom. But for some people, the balancing and all of that makes it not feasible. And if it's easier, there is also the smaller spade if the shovel's too big.